Is BF2 a conclusion? Is it just a statement? Is it a question? Does it support the main conclusion or does it oppose it? What role exactly is BF2 playing here? Hello everyone. I'm Kanupriya Sharma and I welcome you to this video solution by GMATQuizMaster. A lot of students solving this boldface official question have similar confusions about the role being played by BF2. So let's solve it together and get all these answers. Let's start with passage analysis. Delta Products Inc., so this is the name of some company, has recently switched. So it is talking about a recent switch. It is not a very old switch. They have recently changed something, at least partly. So the switch is being said to be at least partly from older technologies using fossil fuels to newer technologies powered by electricity. So we are talking about a switch. We have old technologies that is compared to the recent one. These are the old ones and these are new technologies. Now, the old technologies were using fossil fuels, and the new technologies are powered by electricity. So, you can imagine it very well that from fossil fuels, they are trying to switch to technologies that use electricity. Now, this phrase, at least partly, means even if they have not converted 100%, even if they have not switched 100%, they have maybe switched 10%, 20%, 30%. Some amount is definitely there. Some percentage has already been switched. We are not sure whether it is 100% or not. So, just for our understanding, let's consider that 30% of this change has taken place. They have switched 30% of their operations from old technologies using fossil fuels to new technologies that are based on electricity. All right, let's read further. The question has been raised. Now, some question is being raised whether it can be concluded that the question that is being raised is that can we conclude something. So let's understand what that something is, what is being evaluated for a given level of output. So if we consider a fixed amount of output, delta's operations now causes less fossil fuels to be consumed than it did formerly. So this is the information that is being evaluated. Can we conclude that, and what does this mean? Let's understand this. For a given amount, for a given level of output, let's say we are considering, let's say the output that is being considered is 100 units. So if we consider the same output in both the cases, that is, in both the cases we are getting 100 units of output from delta's operations. Delta's operations now causes less fossil fuel to be consumed than it formerly did. So let's say these 100 units required 1000 units of fossil fuels earlier when they were using the older technologies. Let's say for 100 units they needed 1000 units of fossil fuel. Now the question is whether the amount of fossil fuels for the same output has reduced. Is it less than 1000? This is the question that is being asked. Can this be concluded? Now, if you link this to the previous sentence logically, what is happening? Since the new technologies are based on electricity, they are not using fossil fuels, at least not directly. So it is expected that some of the operations which have been switched to new technologies should be consuming less of fossil fuels. So this is the question that is being asked, that has the overall usage of fossil fuels for the given output, has the overall fossil fuel consumption reduced? That is the question that is being asked. All right. The answer clearly is yes. So the word clearly shows that this is the author's conclusion here, that the answer is yes. Now, what is this? What is meant by the answer is yes? The author is saying that yes, for a given level of output, delta's operation now causes less fossil fuel to be consumed than it formerly did. So the author is saying yes, it is true. The author is concluding that. So we have the reason that the author is giving to justify their conclusion. Since the amount of fossil fuel used to generate the electricity needed to power the new technologies. So we are saying how much fossil fuel goes here to produce this electricity, because we know we have switched from, let's say, this 30% switch has already been done, but the fossil fuels are being used to produce electricity. So the fossil fuel will reduce if the amount that is being here used here directly, let's say, for all the operations earlier, we mentioned for 100 units 1000 units of fossil fuels were being used. Now, since there is 30% switch, let's just for example consider that okay 30%. So 70 units of this output. Let me write it here. 70 units are coming from old technology. So they are using 700 units of fossil fuel. 30 units are coming from new technology. Now, if that technology is using 300 units of fossil fuel, then the answer would be no. But the author is saying that the answer is yes, because the fossil fuel that is required to generate this much electricity is less than this 300. It is, let's say, 100 units. So it is less than the amount needed to power the old technologies, provided the level of output is held constant. This is an important parameter, that we are talking about the same level of output. So the author is saying that earlier the fossil fuel that was required was 1000 units for these 100 units of output. Now, with the partial switch, we are still using fossil fuel for a percentage of this output, but for the remaining output, that is the 30% output, the fossil fuel that is required, that has reduced, because now we need fossil fuel to generate electricity, but that amount is less, right? So instead of 1000, it is less than 1000. So that is the reason that has been given by the author here. Now, let's understand the structure of this passage. So the first statement here is a fact about this particular company, and this fact, it acts like the base on which the entire argument is built. It is being analyzed. The impact is being analyzed. The second statement presents a question. Now, it is a fact that a question has been raised. This is a fact, we cannot challenge that. However, since BF2 is a part of this entire statement, let's look at just BF2, what BF2 is. So, BF2 is the information that is being evaluated. It is not a fact. This entire statement too is a fact, but boldface 2 is the information that is being evaluated. It is not any question, it is not any fact. Let's come to the third statement. The third statement presents the author's conclusion plus the author's reasoning. The conclusion, as we mentioned, is that the answer is yes. Now, accordingly, let's update our bridge table. So, if you understood the passage correctly here, mark a tick here. If you understood the meaning, if you understood the logic, if you understood the structure, that what is the role that is being played by each statement, mark a tick here. Otherwise, if you missed any of these things, you can mark a cross here and write down exactly what you missed so that you can take the right corrective action. Next, if you understood the meaning of conclusion correctly, what the conclusion is, then mark a tick here. However, if you faltered here, mark a cross here and write down exactly why did you falter. So, before we start evaluating the answer choices, let's see what the correct answer choice should convey. We have already understood the passage meaning, conclusion, and the roles being played by various statements. Now, let's focus on the role being played by the two boldface statements. So, the first boldface statement, as we discussed, is a fact. It is a fact about Delta Products Inc., and it provides that context on which the entire argument is built. The entire argument discusses this fact, the impact of this fact. So, this is a fact that this Delta Products Inc. has recently switched, at least partly, from older technologies using fossil fuel to newer technologies powered by electricity. Now, is it in line with the conclusion? Does it support the conclusion or goes against it? It kind of supports the conclusion. Its main role is not to support the conclusion here. Its main role is to provide context, but it is something that supports the conclusion. The conclusion is saying that for a given level of output, Delta's operation now causes less fossil fuel to be consumed than it formerly did. And boldface 1 provides one of the facts that is responsible, that is supporting this conclusion, that Delta Products Inc. has switched from these older technologies to the newer technologies. So we can say that it supports the main conclusion. BF2, it presents the information that is being evaluated, and it is the author is trying to answer this question. The question is that whether we can conclude this. So this is the information that is being evaluated, and the main conclusion, it gives an answer to the question regarding this information, that whether it is true or not, and the main conclusion considers that it is true. So directly we cannot say that it supports the main conclusion or it opposes the main conclusion. It is kind of neutral, but yes, the main conclusion agrees with this information. The main conclusion says that yes, this information is correct. With that, let's move to answer choice analysis. Before that, let's quickly update our bridge table. So, if you were able to understand what roles BF1 and BF2 play, if you had this correct understanding, mark a tick here. However, if you faltered with either BF1 or BF2, or you did not do the step when you were solving the question, mark across here and write down the exact reason. Again, this reason will help you take the right corrective action. Let's start with choice A. The first identifies the content of the conclusion of the argument. So let's understand what is meant by content of the conclusion of the argument. So here, the conclusion that we have is the answer is yes. Now, yes, it is a complete statement. And if you read it in context, you know what this conclusion means. However, this statement in itself does not convey the complete meaning. What is this answer? What is yes? So that is not clear to you. If you write it down properly, the conclusion is yes, for a given level of output, Delta's operation now causes less fossil fuel to be consumed than it formerly did. This is what is meant by content of the conclusion. So, what is it that the conclusion is talking about? Yes, we know that the conclusion is the answer is yes, but what is the entire meaning? That is what is meant by content of conclusion. So, let's evaluate. Does BF1 identify the content of the conclusion? No. The conclusion is not saying, yes, Delta Products Inc. has recently switched at least partly from old to new technologies. This is what this means. If this is true, it would mean that the conclusion is that yes, Delta Products Inc. has recently switched at least partly from old to new technologies, but that is not the case. The conclusion is that yes, for a given level of output, Delta's operation now causes less fossil fuel to be compared, right? So we can say that BF2 provides this content of the conclusion, but that is not true for BF1. So the explanation for BF1 is incorrect here. The second provides support for that conclusion. Again, this is also incorrect. We saw that the second is not supporting the conclusion. Instead, the main conclusion is saying that this is correct. The second in itself is not supporting the conclusion. So the explanation for BF1 as well as BF2 is incorrect here. So let's update our bridge table. So if you selected choice A, first of all, did you understand what choice A meant? This phrase content of the conclusion may have been new for you. Now, yes, it is still commonly used. It's not a very rare thing in boldface questions, this particular phrase. So hope you have a good understanding of this phrase now. But if you see such a phrase, a new phrase, whenever you are solving questions, try to understand what it can mean from the context. So even if you don't know the exact meaning, try to infer what it can indicate. And based on that, analyze the answer choices. So if this meaning was not clear to you, mark across here and take a note that, okay, this phrase was not clear to me, and write down that exact meaning. If you did not understand the meaning of choice A for some other reason, then mention that particular reason. The other thing that could have gone wrong is gauging the alignment. So did you check that this choice actually conveys what the correct answer choice needs to convey? Something that you identified here. If you checked it, mark a tick here. If you did not check it, mark a cross here. And this is a corrective action. You have to check each choice. If you think the meaning of the choice seems correct, you have to gauge alignment with this, what you have. Choice B. The first provides support for the conclusion of the argument. So yes, we discussed that the main role played by BF1 is to provide that context. However, it actually supports the conclusion. It kind of gives that reason that, okay, they switched partly from old to new technologies. So it kind of supports the conclusion that yes, for a given level of output, these operations now cause less fossil fuel to be consumed. So there's no issue with the explanation of BF1 here. BF1 explanation is correct. Let's evaluate BF2. The second identifies the content of that conclusion. So again, as we discussed in the previous choice, the second, it does identify the content of the conclusion, which actually means that this BF2, it explains what the conclusion is about, what the answer yes means. The answer yes means that yes, for a given level of output, Delta operation now causes less fossil fuels to be consumed than it formerly did. So the explanation for BF2 is also correct, and therefore choice B is the correct answer choice here. Now, if you rejected choice B, again, it is important to understand why did you reject it. You have to come up with the exact reason that made you reject choice B and mention that reason here. With that, let's proceed to analyze choice C. The first states the conclusion of the argument. We know the first does not state the conclusion. The conclusion is given by statement 3. So the explanation for BF1 is incorrect. So definitely choice C is incorrect, but let's evaluate BF2 as well. Now, we are evaluating BF2 because you should understand, maybe there's something that you can learn from that. However, in your exam, if you are sure that BF1 is incorrect, the explanation for BF1 is incorrect, you can reject that choice directly and move to the next choice. Now, let's evaluate BF2. The second, BF2, calls that conclusion into question. The second BF boldface does not call the main conclusion into question. So BF2 is also incorrect and choice C is incorrect. Again, if you selected choice C, please go back and update your bridge table. Mark whether you understood choice C's meaning or not, and whether you did you verify that does choice C convey what the actual what the correct answer choice needs to convey. Please update your bridge table. Choice D. The first provides support for the conclusion of the argument as discussed in choice B. We can say that the first boldface provides support for the conclusion. Let's evaluate the second portion. The second calls that conclusion into question. So we discussed this in choice C as well. The second boldface does not call the main conclusion into question, and that is why this portion is incorrect, and choice D is also incorrect. Please update your bridge table if you selected choice D. Let's move to choice E now. Choice E, each provides support for the conclusion of the argument. So we know that this is true for BF1. BF1 supports the main conclusion, so it works. However, we notice that BF2, it neither supports the conclusion nor opposes it. It is the question that the main conclusion is trying to answer, that it is the information that is being evaluated, and the main conclusion is verifying, is saying that yes, this is true. But BF2 in itself does not support or oppose the main conclusion. So that is why choice E is incorrect. Please update your bridge table. So with this, we have solved this question. You have your bridge table updated for this question, and you can easily update your error log. Notice the pattern in the mistakes that you are making for boldface questions. If you need any help deciding the corrective actions, please let us know. Good luck.